So, it's been a few weeks since Roland Emmerich's Gladiator TV show Those About to Die came out, and I'm still no closer to being interested in watching it. Not even for Anthony Hopkins and Ewan Rheon, but damn it all, I'll take any excuse to have an Emmerich watch party. If you don't know Roland Emmerich, no, you do. You know his movies at the very least. He's been described as the master of disaster because since the 90s, he's been behind so many iconic disaster movies. He occasionally dips into other genres, but the disaster films are what he's known for better or worse. Independence Day, The Day After Tomorrow, 2012, hell, even Godzilla. Let me be clear, these are some of the dumbest movies ever written, but simultaneously, they're some of the most fun ever filmed. Emmerich has a real talent for awe-inspiring destruction and entertaining action sequences, all populated by some of the most cliched, stereotypical, irrelevant characters in interpersonal drama ever put to screen. The epitome of popcorn flicks, in other words. But despite his consistent success in disaster films, to his credit, he rarely rests on his laurels and follows his passions, regularly branching out into a variety of different genres and tones. I think of him as a cross between Michael Bay and M. Night Shyamalan, a real auteur full of weird-ass quirks that he gets away with because he self-funds a lot of his projects and produces cinema-defining hits amongst a tidal wave of pure trash. Amongst the disaster films, you've got the sci-fi adventure Stargate, revolutionary war film The Patriot, prehistoric action adventure 10,000 BC. Most of these range from bearable to downright awful, but they all made decent money. But from the release of 2011's Anonymous, a film based on the theory that Shakespeare's plays were actually written by the Earl of Oxford, he never hit again. White House Down, Stonewall, Midway, all of them completely different in vibe and intended audience, and all of them failed to land. Even coming back to the reliable disaster genre with Independence Day Resurgence, and on such a nostalgic IP no less, didn't seem to work. One by one, every single film flopped at the box office. Even the ones that made money, White House Down and Resurgence, fell well below expectations. Now, judging a movie in dollars of revenue isn't necessarily the best metric for quality, and enjoyment is subjective, but it's useful as a broad indication of audience satisfaction with wide release movies, and for the purposes of comparison. And when you look at Emmerich's disaster films, the difference is stark. These things made bank, and more than that, they were social phenomenons in their time as well. Independence Day came out before I was self-aware, but its impact rippled out for decades. What I do remember is asking my mum if Day After Tomorrow could actually happen. She could only really laugh and be like, no, obviously not, but I was genuinely afraid. And don't even get me started on the marketing around 2012. Vulnerable people were already being whipped up by the real-life claims about the world ending in 2012, and they put out this Cloverfield-esque ARG campaign designed to make everything look as real as possible, just with a production company's budget behind it, so it was blasted in front of everyone's eyes. It was so ingeniously cruel. It involved a lottery you could draw from to get a chance to survive. We were hearing stories at the time of crisis hotlines being set up to field calls from crying kids who couldn't tell the difference between reality and advertising, and people who were on the verge of offing themselves to avoid the end of the world. I could make a whole other video on the shit show that was 2012's marketing campaign, and may well do in future. Suffice to say for now, Emmerich movies were capital E events. Yeah, Resurgence was terrible and flopped hard, but that's what happens when you make a legacy sequel without your main legacy star. Will Smith was apparently tied up in Suicide Squad, and I keep coming across stories like this where actors are given two options and the only way to win is not to play. Either way, that was the one outlier. If Emmerich wants to make a disaster film, the odds are in his favor. Which is why, when the first trailer for 2022's Moonfall dropped, I thought for sure that this would be his return to glory. It was clearly right in his wheelhouse, a disaster film with a ludicrous premise and a sci-fi bent, full of cliched characters and incomprehensible mass destruction. And the marketing for this thing was extremely strong. For a spell, you really couldn't escape billboards and TV ads for the film. There was no doubt in my mind, Moonfall would be a hit. Yeah, to my genuine surprise, Moonfall bombed harder than Enola Gay. Critical reviews were lackluster, audience feedback was muted, and it didn't even generate any buzz online by becoming a meme, the last refuge of bad movies these days. You could surmise a few different reasons why people didn't engage with Moonfall. It's bad, for one. Ever since the Star Wars prequels, audiences have been turning on primarily effects-driven pictures without a compelling story behind the flashy CGI. What's on display in Moonfall is just a higher fidelity version of what we've seen before in Emmerich disaster gangsters, but it's somehow even more shallow than ever before. It's hard to say that the writing is worse than previous Emmerichs, but that's entirely the problem. It's the same shit he used to have characters spout off in the 90s, and the world has changed. Or at least, the world has seen enough of these that the cliches are common knowledge, and as a result, tired. I also don't know that the actors aren't trying exactly. Like, I've never seen Patrick Wilson phone in a performance, even in some things he probably could have gotten away with phoning in. I think it's more that all of the choices are very safe, because they've been given uninspiring material to work with. John Bradley is the only one that feels like a character, probably because he's the only one written with quirks, and honestly, he's just playing Sam Tarly again. And then there's the plot. It inherently feels a bit silly critiquing the plot of Moonfall, but it needs to be done. There's only so far suspension of disbelief can stretch, and Moonfall snaps it clean in half. It's one of the most unbelievable and unbelievably contrived films I've ever seen. I never really like to call something contrived. It's a word often used by critics who dislike a movie, but lack a legitimate reason to do so, or lack the vocabulary or understanding to identify what they dislike, so they resort to just describing the things that happen and calling them contrived. Like, oh, she just happened to get shot in the journal, and he just happened to have a bottle of hot sauce on him. Like, yeah, that's right. Things happen like that in stories. So it should tell you a lot that I'm using it to describe Moonfall. Everything that happens is completely out of left field. There are plot twists that seem like they're from an entirely different movie, and for some reason, a sequel tease? Like they were expecting people to want to see Moonfall 2, where the majority of humanity is dead, but Sam Tarly is in the moon doing... well, even this movie didn't even know where the hell that was going. So the movie was pretty bad. Like a lot of Emmerichs, I think it fits nicely into so bad it's good, though I will admit that's a matter of taste. But that's not the whole picture. There's also the context the movie was released in. Logistically, it hit theaters in February, a classic dump month for the distributors given it's right after Christmas, when people have less disposable income than usual, and the weather is usually crap to boot. But the movie itself was clearly designed to be a big budget summer blockbuster, so why did it end up there? Then there's the cultural context. First off being pandemic anxiety. This is around the time companies are still trying out simultaneous or early streaming releases to push their proprietary platforms, and it's hard to compete with content that's tied to an abstract subscription fee, as opposed to all the concrete costs that go along with a single movie trip. Lionsgate spent quite a bit of money on advertising, trying to get people to come out to theaters to see it, and like I said, it showed. But even at this time, there was every chance of localized lockdowns, so not just people, but distributors are wary about banking on something like Moonfall. It got delayed from October 2021 for similar reasons. Companies will often move films to dump months when they don't impress people in test screenings, or it's a genre film that can't compete with 4-quadrant winners like the MCU. Scream 5, for instance, came out just a few weeks before. Despite being on the surface good dumb fun, it was obvious from online responses that Moonfall really wasn't hitting for most people, and most were expecting it to head straight to streaming where they could watch it risk-free, much like many other films of the last year. It's an effect we continue to see happen to this day in mid-2024. Speaking of the MCU, Spider-Man No Way Home came out the previous December and had been almost continuously topping the box office right up until the end of January. They kept that bad boy in theaters right up until The Batman came out in March, and of course it dominated all of the online film discourse throughout that whole period and long after. To be fair, what else were people going to talk about in early 2022? Uncharted? Death on the Nile? Well, there was one film, and this is where the actual premise of Moonfall didn't help it. There's a certain quality to the era of disaster flicks Emmerich thrived in. You know, Armageddon, Twister, they have something that seems lacking today for understandable reasons, and you can see that reflected in the change in how alien invasions are put to screen, but generally, it's hard to have fun with the end of the world these days. Oh, a film about extreme weather caused by global warming killing us all?
I love escapist fiction.
The true story of an oil rig exploding because of gross negligence from the company?
Look at the fun we're having.
A film about a global pandemic killing millions of people? Jesus fucking Christ. Even the ones that seem to be trying for a more glib tone, like San Andreas, barely scratch that itch, because everyone involved is too afraid to be as ludicrous as the genre previously demanded. In keeping with the tone of modern disaster films, Don't Look Up dropped on Netflix in late December, 2 months prior to Moonfall's release. Regardless of what you think of the film's quality, this overt allegory for climate change that also neatly fit into a pandemic metaphor for perfectly encapsulated the strained, seemingly fruitless discourse around both subjects. In short, it made half its audience really angry and the other half got really depressed. Then, 2 months later, with a fresh memory of a generally uncathartic movie experience, Lionsgate want to ask you to buy a ticket, remember that Don't Look Up was straight to Netflix, to another Large Rock Destroys the Planet and It's Mostly Our Fault film, with the one selling point being, this time it's much, much dumber? Nah. You'd think that would be right in the wheelhouse of those people that say, why does everything have to be political nowadays? But those people never mean that, they just don't like minorities. Emmerich already had this happen once before, playing second fiddle to Olympus Has Fallen with White House Down, the poor bastard. Hell, it's probably gonna happen again. Gladiator 2 is about to bury those about to die. So you take all of that and combine it with the critical reception of Moonfall after opening week, a meager 35% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the movie crashes down about as hard as the very megastructure it depicted, which makes 2 disaster movie failures in a row. We're in an Emmerich recession, and that means we're faced with the very real possibility that he may never make one of these movies again. He's not Shyamalan, he can't work his way back up with a bunch of $10 to $20 million horror pictures with like 2 sets apiece that make 20 times their budget back. He's the master of disaster. These things are like 100 million minimum for the effects alone, and I think that's a real shame. For all their faults, I love a good number of these stupid things. They're just patently absurd enough to make me suspend all of my disbelief, but not completely disconnect from what's happening on screen. They're so singularly devoted to the spectacle that you're never bogged down by the tremendous loss of life. You're only expected to care about the people with names, the ones you're familiar with. Familiar, that's exactly what these movies are for me personally. When I see that Roland Emmerich is making a disaster film, I know exactly what I'm in for. Perhaps it's childish of me to cling to these flawed things I should have outgrown, like the rest of the world apparently did. Perhaps it's abusive for me to keep coming back to them despite all of their flaws. But all of that's probably going to end now, and not on my terms and not on Emmerich's. If it does turn out that Moonfall is the last Emmerich disaster film, I want to put something in place that'll allow you, the viewer, to continue his legacy in your own mind, to keep him in your heart and carry his hot garbage with you wherever you go. So I've made a checklist of Emmerich tropes that will give you a framework of everything you need to make one of his disaster films. You're so welcome. And hey, maybe at the end we'll try it out and build our own. But first... The first and most important feature of an Emmerich disaster film is a crackpot premise. It needs to sound scientific, but be clearly absurd if you apply even an ounce of thought to it. Ideally, it should be based on some kind of unsubstantiated fringe theory on the edges of pseudoscience. Those are legit, full of career-making sci-fi writing prompts. Neutrinos emitted from the sun are heating the Earth's core, causing the tectonic plates to shift and exacerbating a million other geological hazards? Perfect, it makes no sense. Polar ice caps melting has caused a sudden reversal of the North Atlantic current, carrying cold water and air down from the Arctic, forming a series of continent-spanning superstorms that flood and freeze the northern hemisphere? So implausible, I love it! The moon is actually a massive Dyson sphere built by ancient spacefaring humans that's being pulled into Earth's orbit by a malevolent AI, playing havoc with gravity on Earth. Let's fucking go! Once you've got that, you need some frustrated scientists to become aware of it fairly early on. This one goes right back to the beginning of Emmerich's Hollywood career, with most of his movies starting with a group of scientists encountering something weird. Partly, their frustration stems from simply trying to get people to listen. Matey in India finds out about the neutrinos going bluey in like 2009, which is a year that comes before 2012. And Dennis Quaid's been trying to warn people about the impending ice age for presumably years. Both Matthew Broderick and Jeff Goldblum have to try and explain their weird plans involving fish and coke to people who think they're insane. Those last two cross over into a subspecies I'll call science weirdos, given how few people with a passion for the sciences are allowed to go along without being more than a little bit mad. But this one is really more of a trait of scientists in movies in general, so I'm not going to identify it as an essential element of Emmerich-esque work. But what's the biggest thing frustrating these scientists? Why, secret government plans, of course. Being morally responsible people, the scientists head straight to the authorities to report their findings and reach a solution, only to find themselves bogged down with bureaucracy, conspiracy, incompetence, and elitism. In 2012, the governments of the world keep the impending end of the world a secret to prevent panic and assassinate any anyone who tries to leak the story, which is bad enough. But on the plus side, they've all reached an unprecedented level of worldwide cooperation to build arcs that can survive the imminent worldwide flooding, and auctioned off tickets for €1 billion a pop, limiting potential passengers to the 1% of the 1%, with the remaining free rides going to specially selected people deemed productive for humanity. You know, great scientific minds and, art historians? Okay, there's still a little bit of nepotism. I love that the ticket price implies that governments didn't actually invest any money in the program. They just set up an Indiegogo for billionaires. Tier 1, you don't fucking die. Half the time, certain portions of the government knew about the disaster even before the frustrated scientists, like how Area 51 turns out to be legit researching a crashed alien spaceship in Independence Day, and in Moonfall they knew all about the moon being a megastructure and the crazy AI defending it, and had planned to take it out with an EMP, but the project was abandoned due to, get this, budgetary reasons. They found out a celestial body is man-made and occupied by an alien artificial intelligence, and somehow couldn't find the money to investigate further. Wait, I actually think this one is semi-likely. Spearheading these secret government plans, or sometimes parallel to them, will be a naysaying politician. Besides the weather and some curiously aggressive wolves, the Day After Tomorrow's primary antagonist is the US Vice President, who took the vice part just a little too literally, representing all of the classic pushbacks to combating climate change. Reducing CO2 emissions will damage the economy. I vote we do nothing and just ignore it.
I made a mistake.
Even while the world is in the middle of ending, he continues to push back against the measures recommended to him by the most qualified scientists. Oh boy, does this sound familiar or what? Mayor Ebert in Godzilla is way more concerned with his image for the upcoming election than he is about the massive goddamn dinosaur roaming around New York eating people. And that's pretty much his only stance in every debate of the film. I used to have so much hatred for the White House Chief of Staff guy in 2012. He's just the most obnoxious motherfucker you've ever seen. When he's not being sneeringly arrogant, he's trying to justify the corruption inherent in their Ark survival plan that led to billions of people dying in complete ignorance. But the cutting-edge scientists and secret government agencies aren't the only people who've figured out the impending threat. No, out in the wild is a conspiracy theorist, played by your favorite actor in the movie, who is somehow 100% on the money about what's going on. You don't need to write too much here, just give them one quirk and let the actor do whatever they want from there. Woody Harrelson likes pickles, Brent Spiner's ass is hanging out, John Bradley has IBS. Traditionally, they die in a spectacular act of self-sacrifice, but that's often tied up with their much more vital trait of being the most important character in the movie, and sometimes the world, outclassing even the frustrated scientists. Randy Quaid kamikazes into the alien ship, saving the day and uttering one of cinema's greatest lines. John Bradley sacrificed himself to take out the evil AI before being digitally reconstructed to help the moon do something. Look, I don't even think Emmerich knew where this bit was going. Or on a smaller scale, without Woody Harrelson's warnings, our plucky band of heroes would never have made it at all, and he goes out in a literal blaze of glory when Yellowstone explodes. But speaking of, who exactly makes up the plucky band of heroes? First and foremost is the divorced dad, or if he's not divorced, he damn well better be estranged. Let's just run down the list, shall we? Day After Tomorrow, not divorced but definitely distant thanks to his work. If it weren't for the much too quick end of the world, I would have given him 3 years at best. Jake Gyllenhaal would move out, the house is empty and lonely, one flirt from someone at the hospital who doesn't see a wedding ring, and the dominoes are tumbling down. If that's not enough for you, the Austin Nichols character's dad is divorced and distant, so that should more than pick up the slack. 2012, straight up divorced. In contrast with a lot of instances of this trope, everyone seems extremely amicable with the situation. All except the boy kid, but that's just because he's a pubescent boy kid, so he hates everything. Joke's on him, he'll get got by a chestburster. White House Down isn't strictly a disaster film, but it's worth bringing up here because it makes liberal use of Emmericisms. For instance, divorced, and like classic divorced. He's late to everything, forgets his kids' events, rubs people the wrong way. Are you seeing why I thought divorce was right around the corner for Dennis Quaid? You'd think Independence Day would be an early divergence from this pattern, given Will Smith and Vivica Fox are happily together and soon to be married. But no, Jeff Goldblum and Margaret Collin are divorced. What's that? You're saying they don't have children? Wrong, he's my daddy, goddammit.
I'm your daddy now, shark!
Taking the place of the divorced dad at home is the stepdad who gets murked. What's weird is that these are the nicest fellas around. Michael Pena in Moonfall, that guy in 2012, they're sweet, respectful, amicable with the dad, and usually do something heroic in the film to endear themselves to the audience. Which is funny because they work at jobs that are usually code for bad guy in our culture. Car salesman and plastic surgeon respectively. It's kind of a big subversion to have the bad job step-parent be an all-round good person. But to be clear, they need to die. Our divorced dad stepdad needs to seamlessly slot himself back into the nuclear family by the end of the film, making the stepdad a loose end that needs to be tied off. Tied off meaning killed in this instant, usually horrifically, whether by suffocating when the moon sucks all the oxygen off the surface of the earth, or getting crushed in the gears of a giant cruise ship. And that's the last you will ever hear of them. Their now widow grieves over them for 3, maybe 4 frames, and quickly goes back to their first husband, who's usually been redeemed in her eyes by this point for his acts of heroism. I don't know, maybe it's the shock of it all, you know, the end of the world and their husband's death, and they're gonna snap in a couple of weeks given all the therapists likely died. But for now, fuck that nice guy, I guess. But I said divorced dad, right? So what about the kid? Well, they're a troubled child whose troubles are irrelevant. We already mentioned the little brat from 2012, but this is more in the wheelhouse of the daughter, with her micro arc of still needing diapers at her age and eventually getting off them, despite having experienced traumas you and I could scarcely imagine, and the existential dread of humanity's uncertain future looming over her head. If I were in her position, as an adult mind, you could not stop me from pissing throughout that whole sequence of events. In an early scene of Day After Tomorrow, Jake Gyllenhaal fails his calculus class for not showing his working, and gets jealous of Austin Nichols thanks to his crush on Emmy Rossum. Do any of these things develop or result in conflict? No, Austin is a total sweetie who actually encourages Jake to tell Emmy how he feels, and if the calculus story is a parallel of something else further down the line, I missed it. Patrick Wilson's son in Moonfall is easily the most intense, having gone right off the deep end after his dad's very public mentee B, ending up getting arrested and jailed for speeding and drug possession. And then there's A-Train in Independence Day 2, who seems to have his shit together, but he is Will Smith's son, so you've got to imagine there's something there. Besides the trouble child, there are also usually a bunch of other kids involved for some reason. I don't know, it's just a thing in these movies. You've got all of Randy Quaid's kids in Independence Day, then the kids Judd Hirsch picks up in the sequel. There's the group of nerd kids huddled in the library during Day After Tomorrow, and the gang fighting off raiders and moon shenanigans back on Earth during Moonfall. I don't know what to tell you, there's just always a bunch of kids. The last thing you'll need to lay the groundwork in an Emmerich movie is a chaotic countdown. The ticking clock plot device is a fairly common trope in media, and Emmerich makes liberal use of it, usually having his finale set around one, whether it's needing to save the day in Moonfall before the moon, falls, or needing to blow up Madison Square Garden before the raptor babies grow up and get out. But don't be fooled, those frustrated scientists may look like they know what they're talking about, but they are truly just making timescales up. Dennis Quaid and crew continuously backpedal in Day After Tomorrow, predicting that it'll be another couple of generations before the world ends due to climate change, and then a matter of years, then months, then weeks, and then he checks his watch and the world already ended 35 minutes ago. Numbers are getting thrown around all over the place in 2012, but my favorite one comes in the form of their countdown timer before the tsunami hits, because at the last second, they suddenly remember that the Earth is a sphere and there's another wave coming from the other direction way sooner. All you need to do is just have people shout different times throughout the film really urgently to emphasize that whatever it is they're doing, they need to do it now, goddammit. But enough of the setup. We need to move on to the main event, the reason everyone really came, the mass death that makes you feel nothing. We don't need to go in depth here. Like I said, it really is the whole point of the film, and as such it arrives promptly, well before the halfway point. The thing that makes Emmerich Disasters unique is the feeling nothing part. You can watch whole cities crumble into the sea, entire continents will be wiped out before your eyes, millions, no, billions dead in an instant, and not a single bit of it will impact you in any way. Bizarrely, the only emotion he seems keen to wring out of you in these scenes is humor.
Pee your pants? Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Is that the Eiffel Tower?
I think so.
So many people are dead. Kicking off this chaos will be the moment, the one that will be on the posters, in the trailers, and seared into the brains of everyone who watches, and that will be the destruction of iconic landmarks. It was Independence Day that cemented this as Emmerich's most iconic thing, with the famous destruction of the Empire State Building kicking off the action. Then he went and blew up the Chrysler Building and Madison Square Garden in Godzilla, then the Hollywood sign, the Statue of Liberty, and the Empire State Building again in Day After Tomorrow. Where do I even start with 2012? Everything you might recognize in LA and Vegas gets sent to the Shadow Realm, but for the most notable single structures, you have scenes where the Washington Monument and St. Peter's Basilica both go down. Moonfall's closing scene utilizes a backdrop of the destroyed Empire State Building once again, but I honestly can't remember a scene of it going down. It's probably one of the many other reasons Moonfall didn't hit. There was very little gleeful destruction of things we recognize, just this one small town falling apart and an admittedly glorious shot of New York getting wrecked. Emmerich started getting economic economical with it in Independence Day 2, having the Burj Khalifa somehow survive the trip from Dubai intact in order to snipe the London Eye, then botching the geography of London so that he could somehow take out Westminster Palace and Tower Bridge in the same shot, despite there being 5 other shittier bridges in between them. No hate to Southwark Bridge, but the Millennium Bridge can eat my ass. Voldemort transported it through time to the 90s just so we could blow it up, and he was right to do so. The most consistent victim of Emmerich is of course the White House, getting taken out in Independence Day, 2012, and naturally White House Down. I mean, it is in the name. Probably the funniest instance is in Independence Day 2, where the alien spaceship destroys most of the Northern Hemisphere, but stops just shy of the White House, which gets a teeny bit of rubble tossed on it. During all of that mass death, in most Emmerichs there's a scene where someone will pull off the most unbelievable vehicular stunt. They don't quite strain credulity so much as they rip it to pieces. John Cusack's character in 2012 manages to drive a limo throughout LA as it's being destroyed by a massive earthquake, managing to thread the needle more than once and even drive through a collapsing building without losing control. Jeff Goldblum manages to evade a towering alien queen in a school bus full of children for minutes on end. I'm no pilot, but my gut instinct is telling me that all of the flying scenes in 2012 and Independence Day 1 and 2 are, if not complete bullshit, at least highly improbable. Moonfall takes the cake, with the group driving off a ledge, held aloft by the weird gravity caused by the moon falling, and bouncing from pieces of debris to the other side, landing upright and safely. So you'll need some kind of vehicle, ideally a car, to pull off an insane stunt that no amateur should ever be able to do on the fly. Speaking of the flying moon car, this could also be your opportunity for blatant product placement. This is coming back to cinema in a major way as the superhero genre gradually slides into irrelevance, the smoking gun being a little girl screaming,
Taste the rainbow, motherfucker!
during the climax of Shazam 2 in what I pray to the high heavens isn't a Nostalgia Critic reference, and all of the characters in Madam Web enjoying a nice Pepsi after their big climactic fight on a Pepsi sign, during which the Pepsi sign killed the villain for them. So while the omnipresent Coke throughout Independence Day may seem like a relic of a time when era-defining movies could just have Reese's Pieces feature in the plot like it's nothing, now we have the Moonfall gang switching their Lexus into sport mode, which allows them to outrun the moon, fucking kill a bunch of people, and Mario jumped their way to safety. No one actually went to see Furiosa, so I could tell you that the movie is all Lexuses racing across the desert at the speed of sound, and none of you could tell me I'm wrong. But while you're never made to give a shit about any of the billions who die en masse, you are clearly expected to give a shit about several specific people, and you know this because they're given a prolonged, tragic death. The Day After Tomorrow has a dynamite one of these. When the 3 amigos are trekking across the snow, they fall into a buried mall. My guy at the top has to brace himself against the glass roof as it slowly cracks under all their weight, forcing gruff-wise Oldman Frank to cut himself free and save the other 2. It would be a landmark in well-executed tension if Jurassic Park 2 hadn't done it like 7 years before, and everyone else didn't also copy it. Anyway, it's slow-mo, heartbreaking strings, lots of no's, very drawn out, very sad. 2012 has 2 contenders, with Satnam's death from the giant wave, and that bastard Yuri falling to his death after yeeting his sons onto the Ark, but it's Sasha that takes the win with his long crash off the cliff after landing the plane. Again, efficiency is the name of the game with late-era Emmerich, as he combines the Merc stepdad and the prolonged tragic death in Michael Pena slowly suffocating to death in Moonfall. If we go right back to Independence Day, the First Lady's death and her family's reaction to it are given so much screen time. Like they were slap bang in the middle of the recently incinerated LA, and Emmerich went, no, don't look at that. Look at the First Lady dying, isn't it sad? These films have only become more and more hilarious as you imagine more recent politicians and their spouses in the place of the film versions. Like, imagine that this is Melania Trump. I'm not gonna lie, I think that's a better movie. Here in the wrap-up is where we'll see the greatest example of misguided world politics. There's an important balance that needs to be struck here. Like, it's not insensitive in a way that pisses anyone off, mostly because it's so earnestly naive and clearly coming from a good place. It's like getting offended by a toddler. They don't have the capacity to commit conscious acts of evil, they just don't know how anything works. You've got the collection of national stereotypes gathered around the radios listening to the US president's speech in Independence Day, essentially going, oh, the president said we should fight now, Sweet. I had no other direction until now. Thank goodness the Americans told us what to do. A similar thing happens in 2012, where all of the world's leaders are convinced by a single passionate speech to let all of the randos onto their mega arc, which may not sound ridiculous until, again, you picture the 2019 lot up on that Zoom meeting, with Donald Trump and Boris Johnson calling the shots for their respective countries. Like, bro, the boats would have already left. I'll just leave you with the thought of the Prime Minister fleeing to Rwanda at the end of the film and let you bask in the delicious irony. White House Down is just adorable in how it suggests that a proposal for peace in the Middle East by the US is quickly and easily agreed to by the likes of Russia, Iran, Israel, and France after the president got shot at for an afternoon. France, I mean, at some points I can believe, but you're telling me that Putin wouldn't be sat at home hearing news of the squeaky clean pacifist president's imminent death? Like, fuck knows what they said to make Iran happy. And Israel signing peace terms. We don't have the time. I'm not going to touch it. Let's just move on from this one. My favorite one has got to be in Day After Tomorrow, where because North America has been consumed by a superstorm, people are fleeing south across the border to Mexico. And this one newsreader says an incredible line.
And now, in a dramatic reversal of illegal immigration, thousands of people are crossing the Rio Grande into Mexico.
Later on, another newsreader exposits that the US government has brokered an agreement with Mexico to take in American refugees in exchange for forgiving all Latin American debt, which provokes one main question. Was Mexico the only negotiator here, or were all Latin American nations invited to the table? And that trickles down into numerous other smaller questions. If it's the former, why was Mexico lobbying for Brazil? If it's the latter, why was that the sole demand of a collection of 30-odd countries? Fascinating subject. Most of the hilarious things in Day After Tomorrow happen on the news, like this guy getting yeeted by a flying sign. The VP goes on the Weather Channel of all things at the end of the movie. Like, I don't know how they swung the exclusive for that one, and he publicly admits that he was wrong, a phrase that has never and will never be spoken unprompted by a politician. And that brings us to the final Emmericism, his pure, unalloyed, hopeful ending. In that same film, after all the screwy weather killing half the planet's population, astronauts on the ISS note that the storms are clearing up, leaving the sky clearer than they've ever seen it, with earlier dialogue suggesting that this tragic loss of life has taught humanity a valuable lesson it won't soon forget about respecting nature, like if the Lorax did a mass shooting. A bizarre one comes in the form of 2012, where tectonic plate fuckery causes massive earthquakes that flood the globe, except once they've set off on their arcs, the team finds out that Africa actually rose up, almost doubling its landmass, and all of the survivors are heading there. It's like a reverse diaspora of humanity, and the film closes on a shot of Mega Africa, the new home of humanity. And finally, Moonfall, which, like I said earlier, ends with Sam Tarly shitting his pants and getting uploaded to the moon so that he can do something. And much like the Dark Universe, we'll never know what would have happened after the first film. So to summarize, we have a crackpot premise, frustrated scientists, secret government plans, a naysaying politician, a conspiracy theorist, a divorced dad, a stepdad who gets murked, a troubled child whose troubles are irrelevant, a bunch of other kids, a chaotic countdown, mass death that makes you feel nothing, the destruction of iconic landmarks, an unbelievable vehicular stunt, blatant product placement, a prolonged tragic death, misguided world politics, and a hopeful ending. Now that we have all of our weird little rhombus-shaped building blocks, we can start to create anew. The wonderful world of Emmerich disasters may have crashed and burned, but from the scrap and ashes we can forge something new, something better. So obviously we need to start with the crackpot premise and go from there, given all the events of the movie will be informed by that premise. Like I said, you can follow along and do this at home. I think you'll find that once you write a crackpot premise into Word, Clippy rises from the fucking grave and goes, "It looks like you're trying to make a Roland Emmerich disaster film. Would you like some help with that?" And then he crumbles into dust, but you'll still find that the document autofilled with all the required tropes nonetheless. The real question is, what crackpot premise to go with? It can't just be anything. Like I said, it's got to be something that appears scientifically plausible at first glance, but becoming completely fucking insane when you look even slightly beneath the surface, like Luke Tipple or Jordan Peterson. A nice safe one, especially in the wake of the success of the Monsterverse, would be Hollow Earth. It could A, be a thing, and B, start collapsing, causing havoc up above and releasing anything from weird chemicals to violent creatures. Or you could get weird with it. A Cthulhu rises from the ocean and starts fucking things up. It wouldn't be a magic summoning, Emmerich is too sci-fi focused, focused for that. Things have to at least sound like they might have a grain of truth to them. So you could approach this like a Meg or an underwater type situation, and Cthulhu is just an insanely massive sea monster that we release by messing around with something in the ocean. You could easily make that about climate change, like we screwed up the Great Barrier Reef so Cthulhu comes to wipe us from the face of the planet. Connect the dots however you like. It was some kind of natural magical protection seal, Cthulhu really liked it, so he's out for revenge, etc, etc. I got real deep into thalassophobia videos in between writing this and actually making it, you know, CGI glimpses of impossibly huge sea creatures, so I'm vibing with this one a lot more now. But my actual pick at the time was using Planet X as the premise. If you don't know about Planet X or Nibiru, oh boy, are you in for a treat. So Planet X as a term existed ages ago, referring to a hypothetical planet in our solar system that would explain apparent discrepancies in the orbits of Neptune and Uranus. But it turned out that Neptune's mass had actually been calculated incorrectly, and when corrected for, there weren't any discrepancies in anyone's calculations. Just a nice bit of legitimate science working as it should. Treasure that feeling, you won't experience it again for the rest of the video. Planet X is a term co-opted for the belief that a planetary body from outer space is headed straight for Earth, either on a collision course or a near miss that'll nonetheless wreck our shit. It's an idea dreamed up by someone who claims to be receiving messages from aliens in the Zeta Reticuli star system through a brain implant to warn her about the planet's arrival, but has moved beyond her to various other mad interpretations. Naturally, this stuff is concentrated gamer fuel for conspiracy theorists, given that we've got organizations that look at space for a living and haven't seen a single planet hurtling towards us. Most of it concerns NASA or, curiously, Google covering the whole thing up for reasons, but it counts on you ignoring literally everyone with a telescope who can just see whether there's a planet on the way. By the way, hi people who commented on my video on conspiracy theorists and movies always being right by saying that they actually are right all the time. Are you sure? As usually happens with doomsday predictions, a few dates for our supposed encounter with Planet X have come and gone without note, but it's never dissuaded its main proponents, again as usually happens with doomsday cults. Obviously that's the crackpot premise taken care of, plus it just makes a really good movie title. You can picture it, right? Planet X. Probably because there already is a movie called The Man from Planet X, about a planet that swoops into the solar system carrying an alien civilization that tries to invade Earth. We're going to go in a slightly different direction to what happens in that film, in keeping with Emmerich's stylings. So we open on an initial team of frustrated scientists, a couple of astronomers who work at the Lick Observatory. One night, they identify Planet X approaching super quickly. They obviously inform the government of the danger inherent in even a near miss of the Earth, but not before having to barrel through the NASA administrator. Eventually, the president will be convinced of the threat because the president is always in these things, when suddenly our main guy, one of the scientists, will be struck with a near incomprehensible vision of sound and images foreshadowing the later events of the film. Cut to some number of years later, and it turns out that the president decided to keep Planet X a secret between the upper echelons of the government and key NASA staff, tampering with all released images of the area of space Planet X occupies. One of the frustrated scientists took a key position in a task force set up to prepare for the planet's arrival in ways we'll get to later, which alienated them from the other frustrated scientist, the one who had the visions, who also happens to be our divorced dad. He started to interpret the visions, coming to the conclusion that the planet carried an advanced alien race that would attempt to wipe out humanity. He suggested the team should pump resources into building orbital defense systems, but was disregarded because these things aren't usually planned from psychic messages. Instead, having calculated the trajectory and velocity of Planet X, they opted for a program to build engines on the moon to redirect it into the planet's path, destroying them both. In response, divorced dad tried to blow the whistle on the planet, but was fired and had his reputation destroyed in a smear campaign, which led to the dissolution of his marriage. He maintains a strained relationship with his ex-wife, who now lives in San Francisco with their troubled child, who's been bullied for having a crazy dad who believes in death planets carrying aliens to us, and compulsively does something kinda weird but not so weird you'd take him to a doctor, more like the kind of weird where you wouldn't let him speak for too long in public without prep. I don't know, they combine Transformers and Barbie toys into part robot, part leggy blonde monstrosities and poses them like Playboy models. Is it the artistic statement of a savant, or are they just a little fucked up? The question that's plagued Michael Bay's viewers for decades. Also in the picture is the stepdad, who's super nice nice and perfect, and while he runs an AI tech company, we need to lay some groundwork for some future events, so he also volunteers at a youth group. Meanwhile, the moon rockets have been built by an international co-op and firing away for the past year, the whole project being kept off the books to avoid suspicion. Oh, and throughout all of this, there will just be a massive Pacific Rim clock with 2 or 3 scientists underneath, poring over sheets of paper and sweating, calculating how long it'll take for the planet to arrive, and every so often they'll pop into the picture to say that it's arriving much quicker than they ever anticipated, until they feverishly work out that it's going to arrive in like 10 days. With the planet now weeks away and sort of visible to the naked eye, the secret government cabal has now upped its game to tracking any and all reports from independent observatories and amateurs with telescopes, doing whatever it takes to hush people up, including imprisonment and assassination. One night, the divorced dad is watching Planet X through his telescope out at the sad divorcee caravan these guys always have, and notices a small object break off and start accelerating towards Earth. He calculates that it's likely to land in the Golden Gate Park, conveniently near to where he lives, and rings the other frustrated scientist. He explains that he thinks it's an alien spaceship, eventually convincing them to at least come and see for certain, appealing to their past friendship. The two head out, and this is where they'll run into our conspiracy theorist, an amateur astronomer who believes all sorts of wild things, including Planet X, because he's also been experiencing psychic attacks and has been watching the planet like a hawk ever since. He also spotted the thing that broke off and came to check it out as well. The mysterious object arrives, revealed to be a spaceship, and when the conspiracy theorist starts to greet it, it fires on them, and they end up in a brief battle in which they down the ship and see an alien inside. Having also noticed the ship and followed the commotion, the government arrives and takes all 3 in, along with the aliens' gubbins. They'll be detained and interrogated for weeks while the naysaying politician says that all the explosions and such were those 3 doing a terrorism, which their families protest. Planet X becomes undeniable, and the government comes out with it, causing mass panic despite their clearly foolproof plan to fastball the moon into the invading planet. When it's a mere few hours away, a horde of spaceships emerge from the planet and attack the moon base, killing everyone there and turning the engines on at the wrong time to try and redirect the moon away from Planet X. It's only partly successful, however, and in the first Titanic event of the film, the moon collides with Planet X, damaging the planet and shattering the moon, sending debris hurtling to the Earth that somehow manages to collide exclusively with iconic US landmarks. Down goes Hoover Dam, down goes the Space Needle, down goes, Mount Rushmore. The other youth group leader is killed by the debris, leaving the stepdad to look after a whole bunch of other kids, loading them up in a pickup truck and taking them off to a camp being set up outside the city for the displaced. Along the way, he'll meet up with the ex-wife and the troubled child, and cross the Golden Gate Bridge, which is hit by debris and starts to fall apart. But not to worry, the stepdad will manage to drive across safely, dodging debris and doing a flip like that one bit in The Man with the Golden Gun. Planet X has spun off course and is entering a very close orbit with the Earth, which along with the moon fuckery is causing havoc with the Earth's tidal and gravitational forces. The aliens launch their attack in full force, splitting into 3 groups that target Eurasia, the Americas, and Africa respectively. The aliens sweep across the US from east to west, detonating advanced bombs over major US cities that completely obliterate them. Ignoring the divorced dad's warnings, the naysaying politician will join a counteroffensive that goes horrifically wrong, resulting in the destruction of most of the US's military and their prolonged tragic death as they die heroically saving civilians. As they approach the west coast, where the remains of the US military have gathered for a final offensive, they attack the camp where the family and bunch of other kids are staying. The stepdad will then send them away in the pickup truck, distracting the aliens in a heroic act of self-sacrifice. The ex-wife and kids will not look back as he violently explodes. The remaining government agents release our main trio and ask for their help in stopping the aliens. The divorced dad, thanks to his visions, has much greater intuition with the alien interface and finds out that they're not natives to Planet X and can't survive on it easily, so they wear suits. Those suits, along with the rest of their technology, is controlled centrally by a base on the planet and is disrupted by radio waves, causing them to malfunction. So they team up with Verizon Wireless to build essentially a radio wave bomb that they can use to kill all of the aliens instantly. The problem is, the atmosphere of both planets will disrupt it, so they need to fly all the way to the alien planet. The conspiracy theorist will volunteer, having had absolutely nothing to do in the film since then except to be the comic relief, and fly an experimental spacecraft carrying the device up to space. Our remaining heroes will all get onto planes and engage in an aerial battle with the aliens, using short-range radio emitters to balance the engagement, but they're still clearly losing. Pursued by aliens, the conspiracy theorist will just manage to breach the atmosphere of Planet X and utter a mid to excellent one-liner before being destroyed by the aliens pursuing him. Just like in every other alien invasion movie, destroying the thing causes all of the other things to stop working, and all of the ships plummet to the ground while Meanwhile, all the aliens on Planet X die from exposure as their suits open up. The survivors across the planet celebrate their victory, and the divorced dad returns to embrace his loved ones. Months later, he's gotten back together with his ex-wife, and the troubled child has stopped doing that weird thing they did. The stepdad will not be mentioned. Their frustrated scientist friend has been promoted and taken naysaying politician's job. A series of news reports will state that Planet X has been found to be habitable by humans with very little support, and the governments of the world are planning to build a space elevator to connect the two planets. As they gaze out at the rebuilding San Francisco, our heroes will remark that this should end overpopulation, scarcity, and homelessness on Earth. We close with a shot zooming out on Earth, its new twin, and the pieces of the old moon, reflecting our resilience in the face of adversity and our evolution to meet the perils of the wider universe. And it's as simple as that. Coming up with a pitch for an Emmerich movie is like writing without giving a shit. It's remarkably easy once you let go of the need to innovate or deviate from a checklist. It sounds really mean, but that's honestly what it feels like. The actual dialogue could probably be written by ChatGPT, given how cliched these movies usually are. The real draw for these things are the effects, and someday soon movie makers will be doing that with AI as well. I don't want to sound like I think these movies are completely lacking in merit or interesting things to show. I'm a big fan of big dumb summer blockbusters. And while the end of the world genre doesn't seem to be widely resonating quite as much as it did for the decades preceding this one, I still find it endearing when it's done the way Emmerich does it, with the kind of earnest willingness to be patently absurd, lacking completely in cynicism or self-awareness. I find it incredibly charming, and it makes his movies oddly comforting to watch, despite the inherent horror in their concepts. I get so anxious going to the movies sometimes, not because the subject matter may be harrowing, or because the filmmakers might make me feel visceral, difficult emotions. I thrive off those kinds of films. They give me life. I get anxious about films from certain franchises or filmmakers because I don't know what I'll think of them. Going back to one of the films that overshadowed Moonfall, I thought for sure that Sony and Marvel would drop the ball with Far From Home, and yet I felt like an excited kid again when the Spider-Man assembled. But on the flip side, I was foolish enough to get my hopes up about things like Matrix Resurrections, and I'm left mostly tired and bored. Don't even get me started on the never-ending roller coaster of quality that was the Fox X-Men series. I still go out and see these things regardless, but the fear remains. See, there's an aspect of human psychology called effective forecasting. It refers to people's ability, or rather inability, to predict their emotional state in the future, whether that's the specific emotion you'll feel, the intensity of that emotion, or its duration. Numerous studies have shown that, generally speaking, we're really fucking bad at this. We expect our emotions to be stronger and last longer than they end up being. We overcompensate and become anxious. But watching an Emmerich disaster, I'm calm. When the ceaseless discharge of cheesy dialogue hits, it washes over me. I saw it coming and I braced for impact. When the unrelenting blare of music and destruction throughout the entire second half buffets me, I don't cover my ears. I am a leaf on the wind. When shit happens like Alexis Mario hopping across an infinite icy chasm because Michael Pena put it into sport mode, I'm not upset. I'm not even disappointed. It's just the way things are. There's an undeniable value to challenging art, to films that shake something in my core that I thought unshakable, that make me question things I held to be fundamental truths, that speak with such profound honesty that they move me to tears, or even films so fucking bizarre that they cement themselves as genuinely unique experiences. But there's also something to be said about predicting how something will make you feel, and then feeling exactly that. It's a kind of calm, a strange empowerment, like returning home after a long time away, walking familiar streets you could navigate blindfolded. Through Emmerich, I know myself. I am safe. I am in control. These are bad movies and I knew they would be. I am the master of my universe. So maybe I'll like those about to die and maybe I won't. It doesn't matter to me. I probably won't be watching it. I'll be waiting patiently for Emmerich to try his hand once again at the thing he does best. Who knows? I hear there's a Day After Tomorrow sequel in the works, or something like it. Even if that never happens, eventually someone new has to come onto the scene and inherit the title of Master of Disaster. Genres never die. They just temporarily go out of fashion. And I hope this build-your-own kit gives you some comfort in the unfashionable days in between. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe to see more, check out our sister channel UDS Gaming, and consider joining us on Patreon with the link in the description. My name's Drew, and I'll see you in the next one.